This is the Great Wall of China. A jaw-dropping experience? These were the words of Michael, an American traveler visiting Asia. What exactly happened on this highly anticipated trip? Before we dive into the details, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. This way, you'll naturally see more stories that match your interests. Now, let's get into it. Today, we're sharing a story about Michael, an American traveler who visited China and Japan, and his experience with line cutting. Interested in history and culture, Michael had long wanted to visit Asia. However, he was soon met with some unexpected challenges. In particular, the cultural differences regarding line cutting at tourist spots left him shocked. Let's compare his chaotic experience in China to the well-ordered sightseeing he enjoyed in Japan. Michael's journey began in China's capital, Beijing. He had always been fascinated by the Great Wall and the Forbidden City. And he was finally able to make that dream a reality. As he landed in Beijing, his excitement for the adventure ahead was palpable. However, his expectations were quickly dashed. Upon arriving at Beijing Capital International Airport, Michael immediately felt the difficulty of navigating the area with limited English signage. Communication with the staff was challenging, and going through immigration took much longer than expected. From the very first step at the airport, I knew something was off. Almost no one spoke English, and the signs were hard to understand. It felt like I stumbled right from the start, he recalls. The highlight of Michael's trip was visiting the Great Wall of China, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. He eagerly anticipated the grand views and rich history. Despite being stuck in Beijing's notorious traffic, which delayed the tour bus by over an hour, he finally arrived at the Great Wall. But that's when the real challenge began. At the ticket booth, there was a long line. But Michael waited patiently, still excited. Suddenly, the tourists behind him cut in front without any hesitation. I never imagined someone would just blatantly cut in front of me. It happened so fast, I was in shock for a moment, he recalls. Unfortunately, this wasn't a one-off incident. More tourists continued to push ahead of him in line. Reaching his limit, Michael tried to protest, but the local people acted as though he didn't exist, moving on as if nothing was wrong. I was so frustrated, but everyone around me seemed to accept it as normal. And I started to feel like I was the odd one out, he says. What surprised him even more was the reaction from the staff. When Michael reported the line cutting, the staff remained completely unfazed and continued their work without addressing the issue. The staff acted like this was an everyday occurrence, and I quickly realized that no matter how much I complained, nothing was going to change, he recounts. This experience made Michael acutely aware of the cultural differences. In the US, standing in line is a basic expectation. But he realized that in China, the rules aren't always followed. It took me a while to grasp that my concept of normal behavior just didn't apply here, he says. Michael's experience with line cutting didn't stop at the ticket booth. It continued at the scenic lookout points and photo spots along the Great Wall, where tourists repeatedly pushed ahead of him. I'd be waiting for my turn, but the moment I blinked, someone else would be in front of me. The breathtaking views lost their appeal as I was constantly dealing with chaos. It was a stressful experience, he says. Instead of focusing on enjoying the sights, Michael found himself preoccupied with holding his place in line, trying to avoid being cut off. Touring the Great Wall became more about defending my spot than enjoying the experience. It was exhausting, he reflects. After his rough experience in China, Michael's next stop was Japan. Although he had heard about Japan's culture of politeness and orderliness, the difference was more than he had imagined. From the moment he arrived, he immediately noticed how different things were. In Tokyo's subway system, for example, even with long lines, everyone stood calmly, waiting their turn to board. The chaotic lines and constant cutting in China felt like a bad dream. Here, everyone was patient, and I could see people truly respecting one another, he says with a sense of relief. At Tokyo's famous tourist spot, Asakusa, Michael was further amazed by the level of order. Even with the crowds around Sensoji Temple and the Kaminarimon Gate, no one cut the line. The staff efficiently directed the tourists, making the entire process smooth. In contrast to the chaos I experienced in China, Japan felt like orderliness was a part of the culture. People lining up wasn't just a rule, it felt natural, he shares. At the photo spots in Asakusa, he also noticed a major difference. Whereas in China, people would constantly cut in front of him while trying to take pictures, in Japan, everyone patiently waited their turn, respecting others' space. Everything in Japan was stress-free. Even when taking photos, people waited for their turn. And I gladly waited for mine. It felt amazing to be in a place where such manners were naturally upheld, he says with satisfaction. This sense of order wasn't limited to tourist spots. Michael was equally impressed by how orderly people were in Japan's public spaces. At Tokyo Disneyland, despite the long lines, everyone calmly waited their turn, and the lines moved smoothly. Even in a packed place like Disneyland, it wasn't chaotic. People were considerate of others. And that made everything go smoothly, he reflects. One of the most surprising places where Michael noticed this order was in the public restrooms. Whether at train stations or tourist sites, people naturally formed lines and waited their turn. Comparing this to his experience in China, where public restrooms were crowded and chaotic, the difference was night and day. Japan's public restrooms were unbelievably clean, and everyone followed the rules. Even in such a small space, the orderliness was astounding, he notes. Michael's experiences with line cutting in China and Japan left a lasting impression on his overall trip. In China, the constant line cutting created stress and took away from the enjoyment of sightseeing. However, in Japan, the orderly system made traveling comfortable and enjoyable. The line cutting in China really ruined the fun of the trip. But in Japan, I didn't have to worry about it at all. This whole experience taught me just how important small acts of politeness are when it comes to enjoying travel, Michael concludes. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to share them below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button for more videos about the wonders of Japan.